Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah? Which do you think it is on or not on? Hello? There we go. Okay. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Feel free to move forward if you'd like, and we'll make this a conversation instead of a one-way speaker panel. But it's a real pleasure and a privilege to have this brilliant set of speakers here. We have journalists, storytellers who are spreading the word about nature conservation and the changes we need to make. We have practitioners on the ground who are building a green economy, protecting the earth, and supporting local communities. And we have the brilliant entrepreneurs and scientists who are building businesses that will protect the earth. Well, it's my pleasure to have you all here. So we're going to start with a question. Can you tell us about a special experience that you've had in nature? And I think we should start with our Austin cover girl here, who has some pictures for us. May or may not have had some inside scoops from the team.
Okay. Is that good? So if I'm okay, is that better? Yeah. All right. So you wanted me to talk about a fun. How did you put it? I'm not going to talk about a profound experience, but a memorable one,
Yeah.
a fun one, because I leave tomorrow morning, and I think it's time for us to sort of have a little bit of lightness. And so this is me last year, post-pandemic. We couldn't go anywhere. I hadn't been to the forest. Some of our team had been, and I'm in the cloud forest, having about 45 minutes. This is north of Quito in Reserva Las Caralarias. And I'm walking and trying to sort of get a lot of pictures, sort of take the forest in, right? And I have a young team member with me, first time in the cloud forest. It sounds like rain, but perhaps it's not. And I see something shining. It's a little thing, very little thing that shines at me. And I keep walking down the path, and 10 feet later, I was like, why did I stop? Not stop. So I come back and I start taking pictures. And I was like, what is it? Whoa, it looked like little gold thing. And I looked and I started taking pictures, and it had colors, and it was turning green and yellow and red. And you're laughing. And for half an hour, I'm taking pictures. And then I start looking, I was thinking, is it really working? Because it's really little, and I'm taking it on this darn phone, right? It's just a Pixel, not a brilliant phone. Don't tell Google. And I sort of zoom out. And okay, it doesn't look so clear here, but I see this creature. And it's got this gelatinous little thing. And it's got little legs that you can't quite see, and it's sort of walking under. And I'm fascinated. And I have two people who've been working in the cloud forest for 20 years, and they've never seen a creature like this. So I'm fascinated, right? And taking videos, doing all sorts of stuff. I come back and I tell my friend Jane, it's like, look what we saw. And she's lived there 25 years in the cloud forest, and she's never seen it. And, Milton had not seen anything. Segundo had not. And they literally work there. And you can't see in this picture, but she named it the Darth Vader beetle because it looks like Darth Vader. So I'm thinking, oh, I've discovered something new. I'm fascinated. I get back to Austin, Texas 2 days later, and I said to my son, I found something new. And I show him my phone, and he does Google Lens, and he says it's a tortoise beetle. I was like, okay, well, I thought it's not something new. My friend Jane sends it to the entomologist who's on her board. And he says, oh yeah, there's 37,000 of these leaf beetles around the world. Some scientists think there are 50,000 of them. And there are a lot of them in the Amazon, but nobody spotted one in the cloud forests. And somebody else will have to go out at some point and find out if, this is indeed a new species or a subspecies, but it was all about having to just slow down and look and be fascinated, because there was this little shiny gold thing and I didn't know what it was. And the other 3 people had walked ahead of me and they had not noticed it. And you think about all the forest is full of creatures left, right, and center. And these are just the things we see, right? And the things we hear about. And so for me, we talk about tech and AI. What robot would have picked that up? We have nothing close ready to do that. And I think that's my little story to say, can we be curious and fascinated? And this is one of 37 to maybe 50,000 species. And perhaps it's a new species and we don't know. So,
speaking of new species, I think the Rainforest Collection has something they want to share.
So
if we go to the next slide.
Okay, so then I said, I'd said no slides, right? We'd said no slides. And then I said, can I have a slide? And this is genus Petricola, which I didn't even know the name of the genus until yesterday. And our herpetologists are in Amazonas, in Peru. And Pablo Venegas, who's the foremost herpetologist in Peru, every time they go on an expedition for 5 days, 10 days, 20 days, he comes back and the team comes back with new species. And he sent that picture. And I thought, I, by the way, asked him, can I share this? And he doesn't have internet right now. And I thought I had to. This is Petricola. They know immediately that it's a new species. And that human side, that human knowledge and knowing, for him to see it and his team to know and know immediately it's new. And then all the frogs that come back with. Every time when he comes back, it's like, how many new species? And then he'll be sending pictures. And of course, that's just the beginning, because you can't claim them. You've got to do all that work to go and do the DNA analysis and go to the Museum of Natural History and write the manuscript and go through the peer reviewed journal process, right? So I think I just wanted to say that we cannot take humans out of the picture, and so much talk about AI, and that's kind of what I wanted to share.
Brilliant, thank you. Thanks for sharing. And we'll say ladies first. So Lena, if you want to go next.
So I really love that we're starting with this question. The work I'm doing today was very much inspired by an experience with nature that I haven't ever shared the full story publicly. And I think it's maybe taken me a while to get comfortable sharing it publicly, but this is the right community to share that with. But I was at a white lion conservation in South Africa doing an interspecies communication retreat, which is basically tuning into nature. It's the idea that before language, we were always connected to nature and could, understand or communicate or receive electromagnetic signals and information. And we've just lost that attunement. And so I'm sitting a few meters away from a white lioness, making eye contact. And she just sat sort of like a sphinx and just looked at me. And in that moment, there was no fear. There was complete humility for her trust, in humans. But also it was a shift in the difference between love and respect. So sometimes we say, oh, I love nature, or I love lions or cats. But in that moment, that love really transformed into this deep reverence and respect for nature. And during this same retreat, we were taken to this sacred place that's on the Nile Meridian. So it's actually in line with the Sphinx. And so this was in South Africa, and it was in line with the Sphinx in Egypt. And we all had to take our shoes off and we sat on the ground and did this meditation with our eyes closed. And this was maybe a 20, 30-minute meditation. And I could hear this really heavy breathing behind me. And I didn't open my eyes. I was like, I'm going to stay in the moment. And when we finished the meditation, I was asking the person next to me, did you hear that breathing? And the ranger says, oh, yeah, that was a leopard. And there was a leopard behind me, which, by the way, if you know predators, you're not supposed to have your back to predators. And it was also another beautiful moment of connection. It was like an interspecies sisterhood or brotherhood. And it was such a profound moment for me. And I was already working in sustainability, but it was really the shift or the catalyst for working on giving nature more of a voice and more sovereignty, and really helping humans value nature.
Thank you. Gents will be boring and go in alphabetical order. So, David, you want to share?
Okay. All right. So I guess I might be probably a little bit nature blind. That's in part because I'm from the Congo Basin. So I see a lot to the extent that at some point you don't see anything anymore, right? What's perhaps, I guess, fascinating for somebody, it doesn't get fascinating to me anymore, I suspect. So I guess I would not have seen the little species that you saw and you had to come back and do photographs, right? Yeah, but talking about experiences with nature, I have had plenty because I live, again, from Cameroon, so just so that everyone knows. And I have actually visited other countries of the Congo Basin, but usually my favorite experiences are in the DRC. And one of those was back in 2016. I went out to Lubumbashi. Lubumbashi is actually in the southeast of the DRC. That's in the Haut-Katanga region. And it's part forest, but also a lot of minerals. And so I went out to train journalists on how to do data journalism. And in the evening, or rather, I think on day 3, they had actually suggested that we go out for a field trip. And one of the young guys who invited me said, David, if you don't mind, we can stay the night because it's actually close to where I live. And so we went out watching birds during the day. And then in the evening, we stayed in the community. What's fascinating about this is that, of course, I guess that if you are a Westerner and you're traveling into regions such as most regions in the global south, you sort of want to do your assignment by reading out as much as you can about the country, security, et cetera, et cetera. But then we were hanging out there in this local community, like 50 kilometers away from Lubumbashi, having plenty of fun, having drinks in the night, listening to Congolese music. And you can tell that the happiness index was pretty high up there, right? Which is primary. I mean, I guess oftentimes, not the narrative that you and I get every single time when you talk about the DRC. I think when everyone talks about the DRC, it's somebody killing another person, or it's another Ebola or something, right? And this was, the same kind of community where you have all these narratives about them. But, we were having so much fun. Every music that came around in the evening, of course, people would just basically be singing and having fun. And, I've had a lot of that. But then what was very inspiring about that, of course, was that, for these young journalists who oftentimes would live and work in, environments where the media is questioned in a very significant way, their safety is always, a major issue. But they had courage to want to continue to hold people who are in power accountable. That just reminded me at some point how much it is important for me to continue to do the work that I've been doing, which is helping to coach and mentor a lot of young reporters. And by the way, one of the reasons why I also left corporate communications to come back into journalism, because I only joined Mongo Bay like 2 months ago.
Thank you. Dick, do you want to go next?
These are hard stories to top. I'm not going to even try. I've been fortunate to have a lot of different experiences in nature through being a parent and traveling while I was in college and things like that. I was the youngest of 4 kids, and by the time I came around, my parents wanted me kind of out of the house in the summertime, and so they would send me away. I grew up outside New York City, and they would send me up to the northern Adirondacks, which is the mountain range in central New York. and I would go on these YMCA canoe and camping trips, and so they would just like get me out of there, you know. And that was really sort of like the origin of my connection with nature, because I had never experienced the challenge and the satisfaction of backpacking, of like seeing a mountain and having all your stuff on your pack and just not really feeling like you want to spend the time to walk up that mountain, but doing it and like one step at a time, and just the clarity of mind that comes from that, and then the accomplishment, the feeling that when you're on the top of the mountain. But other times it was, you know, trying chewing tobacco for the first time on a canoeing trip and realizing that was a horrible mistake as a 12-year-old. But during those times, I realized that everything just felt right, you know, in the world that I had experienced up until that point, being in those quiet places at night and being with people that I liked. Things just made sense. And for me, that's been the through line really of my career.
Last but not least, Damien.
Yeah, thank you. I have two related situations. The first one is I grew up east of France, and my father had a very busy job, but every Sunday we went in the forest, in the Vosges mountain, and it's where I experienced during about 10 years, every Sunday, that this was the time where I really, really discover and connect with my father. And I just experienced that actually forest is bringing peace and quiet in a very speed world. And I believe 30 years later, the world is accelerating much more, and we still need this forest to bring peace for everybody. And 15 years later, when I just graduated from the forestry school in France, my first project was in Senegal, first ever project. And then just graduated, I was building my first nursery with a small team. And Fatima, a woman, just came to me and say, hey, can I grow some tomatoes? Just there is access to water. And I was saying, okay, I'm taking about trees. A little bit, you can take this piece of land and that's okay. The week after, she came with 20 women and just say, we can help you to give water to the trees and just give us a little bit more piece of land for tomato and gombo. I say, okay, then I enlarge a nursery. It doubled, tripled the size, and she really mobilized a lot of women, and she were happy to come, grow the vegetables, and at the same time give water to my trees. That was it's where I learned, connected also to my story with my father, that actually taking care about trees is more taking care about people.
Wonderful. Thanks everyone for sharing. So now we can get down to the more technical stuff. I'd love to learn more about your work, if you could share a little bit with everyone, and where digital innovation and tech come in. Now, I think there's a little story we can weave here. So I have an order I think we should go in. So first David, then Neonta, then either Dick or Damien, and finally we will end with Lena.
All right. Well, thank you again, India. So just so everyone knows, I work for MongoBay now. MongoBay is an environmental news website, probably one of the most important conservation voices in the world now. And so it's obviously, I mean, I guess many of you might know it already, but if you don't, it was created by Red 1999. That's over 24 years ago. For the first 10 years, he literally ran it by himself. But after that, he then decided to change the model, get it into an NGO registered in the US. So it raises funds from philanthropic organizations, et cetera, et cetera. And then we use that to build spatial reporting projects on key issues, you know, from land degradation to oceans, to climate change, you know, to biodiversity, et cetera, et cetera. And so we have a broad breadth of coverage of issues around the world right now. So I joined to be able to help scale up in Africa. So that's what I'm doing at this point. So being a digital platform, you would understand that obviously what we basically do is gather and package, process, and, you know, publish news about conservation issues, a lot of conservation science, to put it that way, but also, you know, the real hard stuff, investigations into some of the corrupt practices of businesses in you know, perhaps, you know, different sectors in the developing South. In Indonesia, we're doing some great work. In India, we're doing some great work. In Latin America, same thing, and in Africa as well. So that's what we do. But in addition to that, because we've also understood how much data and satellite data, et cetera, could be important just to be able to have visualize and have a greater sense of how things are evolving, whether it's deforestation over time, et cetera. We also partner with a whole lot of other organizations. So the Global Forest Watch is one of the platforms that we partner with. They give us data, as a matter of fact, because they have what you'd call satellite monitoring of the key rainforest, Amazon, Congo Basin, and in the Mekong area. And so that data, you have to make use of it. A lot of it, scientists use that data, but can journalists use it? Usually the question was, can journalists use that data to be able to make sense out of it for a layperson to properly understand something? And we've proven that it's possible. And basically, it's about having somebody who can actually, of course, gather, and I'm talking here about qualitative and quantitative data. Let's be very clear as far as that is concerned. So yeah, of course. So we have been able to improve the quality of our reporting. As a matter of fact, you can, using that data, you can see whether if you're in the Congo Basin and you want to see maybe, for instance, degradation or forest degradation over time, say in the last 10 years and the last 20 years, you can see where you were several years ago and then where we are at this point. And usually that doesn't mean anything a lot. So you have to get journalists on the ground to be able to do, properly do an investigation to understand exactly what's going on. So that's what we do. In terms of impact, you would argue that there are huge impacts. So I'm talking about Mongo Bay right now, but before Mongo Bay, I was also in other similar projects. The impacts are huge because at the end of the day, keep in mind that, yes, of course, we're a media institution and we're expected to be measured. And so sometimes when I go into this and I'm trying to be very passionate, I'm also fully aware that I have to be measured because I do not take sides. I do not advocate. I'm not an advocate, right? Keep that in mind. And so what that simply means here is that, but we care about impact because we want to keep in mind that we have a theory of change that goes from more awareness, obviously leads to the mobilizing as many actors to be able to do what you call addressing planetary crisis, from climate to biodiversity, pollution, or whatever. And so, yes, our reporting is leading to a whole lot of things. If you look at just the ocean space, you realize that Mexico, for instance, had to place a moratorium on deep sea mining as a result of our reporting. If you look at, we just won, we've been winning a lot of awards in the last several weeks or months or years, which is great because that's also a recognition of the fact that you're contributing to accountability and transparency, right? So that's what we are doing. The impacts, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that because, yes, of course, at the end of the day, the most important here for us is that this platform is able to sustain itself and do the right partnerships with those holding data and those working on monitoring and gathering data with the scientists, those who are actually doing all of that rigorous process that you just talked about and getting to a peer review final stage. And we taking that and actually putting it out there so that people understand. That's what we do. So that's, I don't know if that's enough for now says.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Neonta, you should go next.
So we started focusing on sustainable livelihoods. And it became very clear very quickly that if we did not have an integrated approach working directly with communities, so our work at Rainforest Partnership is about working directly with communities, sort of communities at the center of what we do. But if we focus just on sustainable livelihoods and did not have an integrated approach, then it was often going to be the David versus Goliath situation. So our integrated approach meant that we needed to bring in conservation science, yes, but education, governance, we had to bring in creation and management of protected areas and doing those biodiversity assessments. Of course, it's fun to talk about the biodiversity assessments, right? And doing the biodiversity work, you discover new species, and I don't do that, but the team does that. Sustainable livelihoods is really important, and we were just in the, today, the forests are not forgotten, thankfully, because I was feeling this COP that we've lost focus on forests. I don't know about any of you here, but that's how I was feeling. Even yesterday, I kept hearing people say, oh, tomorrow is Oceans Day. And it was like, no, it's Nature Day. Forests, just as important. It's like there were so many places I was going and talking about forests, importance of forests. Cannot get to any stable climate unless we protect these forests. We do not have negative carbon emissions or anything else at scale at the moment. If we stopped fossil fuels today, we do not get there. And so listening to what different governments are trying to do with the Glasgow Declaration on deforestation from 2 years ago, I thought that was good. But here's the thing, I still haven't seen a plan. And so for me, how do we get to educate folks? So part of our integrated approach was we had to do the biodiversity assessments, because how do you get regional and local governments and national governments to protect something unless they know what's in their backyard? Indigenous communities know that, but there's that scientific part as well. It's not taken seriously, right? It's hearsay. Even the petricola, it's hearsay until it's actually published and it's a new species, right? And so our work, the integrated approach on the ground, but the other side of the equation has also been part of our work from the beginning. So empowering the communities as stewards and the guardians that they are, not imposing ever. And then where do all the rest of us live? And so we started with Films for the Forest, and we found very quickly that we became the hub and conveners of other people's stories. So we get films from around the world, and for our short film competition. And we've been doing it since 2010. And we get a lot of people saying, can you do longer form? Because they have no other place to tell the stories. So I feel like that's something we've got to solve. We're founders of World Rainforest Day, June 22nd. And we had a reach of 93.8 million this year. We had a global summit, and we had people online from 77 countries. I thought that was pretty remarkable, and some incredible conversations and solutions as people come together in these virtual spaces, because there's some incredible platforms now available. During the pandemic, we launched Gen Z for the Trees. Why? Because if the Zs and millennials are not involved, and a lot of our team members are millennial and Zs, and think about the power they have. So I had 3 Zs with me in Glasgow, and one of them had turned 20 the week before. And I thought that was important, because a lot of people talk about young people, but do they take them as part of their delegations? Do they give them the platform? How do you integrate and incorporate them? And there are a couple of other things like that we're doing, because doing just our work is not enough. Because we remain siloed, and we remain in sort of a blind spot from everybody else. So how do we bring all the other folks in? And so the only other thing I'll tell you is it used to be, for any of us that have been going to the COP for a long time, it used to be a forest day, a whole day on forests. So I ran into Francis Seymour, who used to be part of that. And I said, what happened? I heard the story yesterday. So now I'm collecting all sorts of people today and saying, can we have Forest Day next year on, wherever the COP is? And that's where all of us care about forests, whether we're in government, NGOs, in tech, in whatever solution. Can we come together like we used to? So anyway, it's not quite telling you what we do, but it is also telling you what we do.
Thank you. Dick, do you want to go next?
You always laugh after I say something.
No, not laughing.
Hopefully.
It means that we're all enjoying it.
For sure. Yeah. Hopefully it didn't come across any other way. Okay. So yeah, I work for Pachama. Pachama is a climate tech company with a mission to restore nature to help solve climate change. And what that means is that we work with companies to help them meet their climate targets by sourcing high quality avoided deforestation or reforestation credits. And as many people know, a lot of companies are taking responsibility for their emissions and as part of their decarbonization journey, also investing in high quality nature-based removal credits or avoidance credits. And but many projects over credit. So there's not a lot of sort of rigor and transparency with many projects around the world. So what we do is we apply independent checks using remote sensing and AI to evaluate the climate benefit of the projects that are listed. And we only pass about 20 to 30% of the projects that we evaluate, which limits us as a business. Frankly, it's definitely a supply constrained business that we're in. But we do feel like that's a high integrity approach right now. And that helps companies make sure that they're managing their financial and reputational risks well. And using AI and remote sensing, you know, we feel in that process of evaluating a number of projects, we're a 5-year-old company, about 85 people in about 19 different countries. And we realized that there's a real future supply gap in terms of high quality reforestation. So we launched Pachama Originals, playing off of Netflix Originals, about 1.5 years ago. And so now we're helping to develop native species focused reforestation projects around the world to really try to put the nature back into nature-based solutions. I feel like, you know, I was in 1992, the Rio Summit, I had just graduated from high school. And so I sort of look at all this long arc of where we are and can't help but be a little bit frustrated, you know, candidly. But the application of technology to the voluntary carbon market, we feel is critical. And it's because, you know, to use voluntary carbon market and to use compliance carbon market to achieve meaningful climate targets is going to take quite a bit of scaling. And the way that the projects are developed now is quite inefficient, quite bespoke. Methodologies are subject to gaming, and that clearly is not necessarily helping ecosystems, people, or the climate. And also it's eroding trust in the marketplace. This is somewhat my third act in terms of my career. I started as an activist doing direct action and filing lawsuits to protect forests in the US, in the Western US, and realized that that was a great tactic and not a great strategy. So I went back to graduate school and spent 20 years as a conservation scientist, writing papers, developing tools, helping people understand the value of nature and the opportunities to protect it. And I worked for the Nature Conservancy for 18 years, and I got to the point where I had seen all this energy, all this money, all this excitement coming from both tech funders and corporate America and corporations around the world. And I saw this this opportunity to link the extinction crisis with the climate crisis. And obviously, I'm not the one to link those. Obviously, a lot of people have been working on those for many years, but I saw a potential missed opportunity with the type of carbon projects that were going on around the world that were not creating benefits for nature, that were not necessarily providing benefits for people. And I wanted to contribute to that. And I came from the early days of ecosystem service quantification and really focused on how do we map and value nature. And then I realized that nobody's going to do anything if you don't solve a problem for them. It's not about how elegant the tools or the models are, or how valuable nature-based solutions are. It's about what value investing in them provides to different constituencies, either governments or individuals or companies. So it's sort of a little bit personal story as well as what Pachama does.
Wonderful. Damien?
Yeah, good. At Terraformation, we support forestry team on the ground, basically all the Fatima, helping to scale up the restoration forest initiatives. How we do that? We set up an accelerator, the Seed to Carbon Forest Accelerator, providing 3 main solutions to the team on the ground. One is capacity building. It's still one big area, and we develop a training curriculum for the team, forestry team, to give technical trainings on ecology, restoration, on the source of finance, carbon market, how does it work. It's still something very complicated for most of the team on the ground. Then we are providing this quite good explanation for them. That's one piece. The second is a seed bank. We build a container where we are able to collect, store in a good condition, and propagate seeds. If we want to make really native biodiverse forest restoration, we need to take care about the seed and the seed supply. And most of the teams that are doing really restoration on the ground, they will say, hey, I don't really know. There is no actually supply chain in my country. There is no certified seeds. I don't know where to find the good seeds, and I will take just the one able to do. And then the most of the project are with 2, 3, or 5 type of trees species, just because we need to work on the supply chain. Then we are bringing this solution. The container, we can bring it everywhere close to the planting site and the nursery. The third solution we are bringing to the teams is tech. It's where we are speaking about tech. Half of our company is people from the tech world, and the other half from the forestry and conservation. The tech piece is bringing a project management tool called TerraWare, helping the team to better plan where are my seed, where I can put my seed bank, my nurseries, and how I can track the plot on the planting side of my project. It's really, there's a lot of innovation in tech for the monitoring aspect. We are focused on facilitating the job of forestry team with this project management tool. We of course add some monitoring modules in it, but that's not the most needed piece for the moment on the ground. And lastly, access to finance. It's one of the main constraints. Still, our forestry world was during the last 30 years focused on grants, writing grants to access to funding. Now there is kind of a big shift with the private funding, but it's still a lot of methodology to write and complicated things. Then we support this technical work with the project to be able to access the carbon certification and access to the carbon funding. Then we are bringing on board investor to finance the project. That's how our accelerator looks like. We are already 2 cohorts, one in Ghana, Kenya, Colombia, other project in Philippines and Indonesia. And we're going to launch in February 8 other projects in Cameroon, Tanzania, and again Ghana and Kenya. We do believe that one big piece is the supply, the project, and then we are dedicated our energy to the project. Yeah, that's it.
So I focus on the nature finance piece, and going back to this lion conservation in South Africa, the woman who runs it was saying to me, if we just had 200 million euros, we could protect all the land in South Africa for nature. And I remember thinking that's not a lot of money for the whole of South Africa. And, you know, I came to this realization that natural capital, as most of you in this room would know, is worth over $140 trillion, which is 1.5 times global GDP. It's worth more than all the unicorns combined. And yet there's this dystopian paradox that it's the most valuable yet undervalued asset. And so when I started researching the bottlenecks, there's many, but the one that I'm focusing on is the data to actually find projects to invest in. So I also have a social enterprise that works on getting women on boards, and I hear very similar things because men will say, we would have more women on our boards, we just don't know any. And that's sort of how I feel with investors and nature projects. So we have been building a sort of Crunchbase or Bloomberg for nature. So it's an investment database of nature-based solutions projects. We're not a marketplace, so there's no transactions. We don't develop our own projects, but we aggregate all of these projects in one location, and we look at more granular data points that you wouldn't find in a traditional financial database. So we don't just look at deal size or even just, SDGs or ESG ratings. We look at what species are you planting for conservation versus commercial reasons. What are the end commercial markets? What forest and marine certification standards are you using? What is the history of the land? What are the land tenure rights? What are the social risks and benefits to local communities? And then we also, at the moment, it's non-algorithmic, but that is the future plan, is we also provide NatCap analytics. So the root problem is not that nature is underfunded, it's that nature is undervalued. And so how can we, and if anyone's done a natural capital valuation, it's extremely expensive, it takes months, it's very cost prohibitive, and it's complex. So our goal is to be able to provide those analytics in one click and be able to show the unpriced value of nature beyond carbon and commodities so that we can start enabling payment for ecosystem services and have governments and insurance companies and other beneficiaries actually pay for those services. So I think, I mean, I'll pause there. I can elaborate, but I'll leave it for the other questions.
That's fantastic. I'd love to open questions to the floor now that we've heard some of the amazing professional and personal backgrounds of our speakers. If anyone has any questions, let me know. Otherwise, it's fine. There's more questions for me. Okay. Oh, cool.
Thanks a lot for sharing. I would like to ask you to Lina, just continue what you're saying. How do you see we can transpass this barrier? Like, what is the practical moves that we can push? Because I've been dealing with this myself for years, try to push, and I think everybody here, how can we break through,
So I'll give you the good news, because before we built Symbiosis, we interviewed hundreds of, everyone in the space, whether it was asset managers, advisors to financial institutions, investors, companies. The good news is there is an appetite to invest in nature. There's a lot of companies that have nature targets. There's a lot of investors. Actually, 53% of institutional investors are now integrating natural capital into their investment strategy. So the will is there, and that number is just going to keep growing. The problem is that 85% of the capital that has been earmarked for nature is unallocated because they're not able to find bankable and high integrity projects. So with the bankable, for the BlackRocks and JP Morgans, they're looking at a minimum of a $50 million ticket size, which most bankable nature-based solutions are under $1 million. So part of what we're hoping to do with the platform is when you start to aggregate all of the projects, it allows the deal aggregators who come and bundle smaller projects into larger portfolios, and then they can market them, position them, and take them to the larger institutional investors. So I don't think data is the only problem, but I think that it's a key enabler. When it comes to valuation, I've seen in the last few years a lot of climate risk analytics companies come up with very sophisticated ways to say, in this particular dot, this lat long, or this particular asset, they've been able to do stress testing and multi-factor scenario analysis to say, this is what we expect your financial risk to be for this asset in this location. And this is based on climate data. It's based on the elevation of the land, the slope, the macroeconomic data, the building density. So it's trillions of data points. And then they look at what is every possible scenario, what is the probability of each scenario, and then they can assign a financial value and give an estimation, a range. If they're able to do that for climate risk, we can do the same for valuing nature. we're not there yet because that's the more expensive part. But I do think it's possible. And I think everyday technology is, we're on an exponential kind of up curve. So it's getting easier and less expensive to do.
Go ahead.
I'm not sure if it's a question or getting free consulting, but that's why I came. I mean, I'm a social impact entrepreneur, culture shaper. I'm in blockchain, sustainable fashion, agriculture. My family own 3,000 hectares of land in Cameroon, in the Southwest province, and he knows there's a bit of a conundrum there now with civil unrest. So I put the project on hold, but nonetheless, I'm sure this problem will clear up at some point. And where I own this 3,000 hectares of bush, Prince Charles came about 35 years ago and instituted a corrupt park. It's no more than 50 kilometers from where I have this family property. In Idenau, which is near the sea, I also have 200 hectares. And having been to the World Economic Forum and all of these sort of conversations, I'm still not sure strategically the first step of creating some kind of analysis of what approach in order to obtain carbon credits on the property that we own, so that, regenerative agriculture can serve the local population. As a result of the war, the displaced people can benefit. And the low-hanging fruit for now is just setting up a climate change academy, of which I have British Council as a partner and some existing organizations that do education around climate change. But if I were to approach an institution for carbon credits funding or trying to cut a deal, I'm not exactly sure what step 1, 2, 3 would be.
So maybe you can answer.
You can try. Yeah, I mean, I think first thing would be to think holistically for decades. How do you want this property to be managed? Like, what else do you want to get out of it? You said it's bush now. Okay. So it's really a question of, ultimately, for you to issue credits and for someone to buy those credits, you're going to want to adhere to an existing methodology. And so there's, there's Vera, which is one. There's a Climate Action Reserve. There's Gold Standard, and there's ACR, American Carbon Registry, which may not work for that part of the world. But thinking through, like, you would only get carbon credit if you're bush. I assume bush in that part of the world means forest, like mature forest. Yeah, you would only be able to get carbon credit if there's a threat to that forest. But that threat could be you wanting to generate revenue from timber harvest. And so that would be sort of something like an avoided planned deforestation. Which is happening already. A lot of trees are being... Yeah, either through illegal poaching from incursions or it could be something could be illegal that you decide you want to do. And so there has to be some alternative scenario by which that forest gets cut down or gets degraded or gets lost for you to be able to generate credits. But I would think there's, I don't know, in that part of the world, like how companies that are developing projects would find you. But, I would think that there's, it's probably too small for Wildlife Works, but I know Wildlife Works is one of the larger RED project developers in that part of the world. So I don't know, maybe other folks know, David, if you know other.
Well, I don't know, perhaps just in terms of my knowledge in covering or getting to support carbon credit reporting projects that I've seen, there is an alliance at this point on the continent, which is a consortium of, governments and businesses that I think I can refer you to talk to them because it's actually existing. They were heavily involved in the African Climate Week that held in September in preparation to this event. And so, yes, they're doing a lot of the work that you're also doing, which is to properly sensitize the stakeholders to understand the overall ecosystem of carbon credits and how it works and how they can, make that profitable for actors around. Obviously, that's it's just a controversial thing as well. We know that, right? Yeah, so that's the only thing that I can add right now. But we can talk bilaterally. Good to hear some of the things that you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I can add something as well. So we've been putting together, it's not shared yet because we're still working on it, but we've been putting together a database of all the different corporate or investor alliances to have some sort of nature target. and, sort of indexing what are the targets, what countries that they focused on. I can't send you the database because it's not complete, but I can send you what are the different alliances. So you can look at which companies have signed up or investors have signed up that operate in your country. And then you can go to them and say, I see you have these nature targets, and, and basically say, I can help you fulfill those targets.
Just quickly, you asked the 3 steps. One, define what you want to do. There is 3 type of forestry projects. It seems that yours is a conservation, red. There's also restoration and improved forest management. And this is step 1. Step 2 is linked with land tenure. It seems that it's clear in your case. If you have the title and everything, that's really good. Most of a project developer, it's a big barrier. Then this is step 2, and together with the national regulation of your country, just check if it's already clear, a little bit clear, or not clear at all. It gives you an area of risk, and you can check with the. It will be in your case then with the REDD+ coordination. And number 3, I think if you're on your own, it seems to be better to find the good REDD+ project developer to help you through all these methodologies that are still a little bit complicated.
Yeah, this is fantastic. This is wonderful because I had so many questions, but we've had such a rich conversation that we could have taken further. But one of the questions I thought about asking was, how can we all collaborate? We're from different fields within nature. How can we work together? But here's a concrete example of everyone using their expertise to protect nature. So hopefully we'll see something great come of it. So I have to wrap up, I'm afraid. I'm getting the timeout signal. But thank you so much, everyone attending. And let's put our hands together in a second for our amazing panelists. Thank you for sharing your time and expertise.
I just wanted to say, we think that we have to work within the parameters and the limitations that are created by the laws and the formats that are created. One of the things I've been hearing at this COP, I had this wonderful conversation. It's too early for me to have really processed it. How are we not really thinking seriously outside the box? Like, if we were sitting and talking, I wanted to say something controversial, so it's a good I didn't. But how do we think otherwise? Like, we don't have to accept the systems right now. We need to solve so fast. Most of the solutions we're talking about, any of us, they're still not fast enough. Yours might be the fastest, and it's not fast enough for what we need to do. And so my invitation to everybody here is, whatever sphere we're in, who can we collect and collaborate with, truly collaborate, and try to solve in ways that we've not thought about. And this is what I've been doing. When I'm literally gathering names. Who can be in a circle with me in solving in a completely different way? And one of those people today for me was a man in Brazil who's working with 8 million farmers. I think it's like either 1.2, 1.5, or 1.7 farms. I can't remember which one of the numbers. Think about what that power is in agriculture. It's a lot of farming and forests. Sorry. So all I'm going to say, sorry. So all I want to say is, will you all think? Can we all think? We owe it to our planet. So thank you for having us.